It was a chilly autumn morning when Emily stepped into Starlight Medical Center for her first day as an intern at the reception desk. The air smelled of fresh coffee and antiseptic, the latter reminding her that she was at a hospital, a place she never imagined herself working. She had always envisioned a career in corporate communications or marketing. But fate had led her here. She had been accepted into the hospital's internship program. And today, she would begin her journey in the world of healthcare services. The first few hours of her shift were a blur, an endless stream of visitors, phone calls, and paperwork. Emily was trying her best to follow Megan, the head receptionist, who had kindly offered to guide her through the ropes. Megan, an older woman with a no-nonsense attitude, had been working at Starlight Medical Center for years, and she seemed to know everyone. As Emily struggled to keep up with the pace, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her responsibility. This was her first real job, and she wanted to make a good impression. But things took an unexpected turn when Mr. Lee, the founder of the hospital, arrived for a surprise visit. Emily had been briefed on him. Of course, everyone at the hospital knew who he was. He was a legend in the medical world, a visionary who had built Starlight from the ground up. His presence commanded respect. Emily had heard stories about how Mr. Lee could be both demanding and gracious, and she knew that this was a moment that could make or break her reputation. "Emily, could you please take care of Mr. Lee while I handle these papers?" Megan asked, her tone not leaving much room for hesitation. Emily nodded, her heart racing. She had read about Mr. Lee's achievements, and now, she was expected to greet him, ensure his comfort, and make him feel at home. What was even more intimidating was that he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by Mr. Thomas, a high-profile businessman who was considering investing in the hospital's expansion plans. Emily had no idea how she was supposed to manage both of them at once, especially when she barely knew the ins and outs of the place herself. "Good morning, Mr. Lee, Mr. Thomas. Welcome to Starlight Medical Center," Emily said, trying to sound confident as she greeted the two men. Mr. Lee smiled kindly, his presence warm despite his authoritative demeanor. "Thank you, Emily," he said with a deep, soothing voice. "I hope my visit today will be productive. We have much to discuss." Mr. Thomas, on the other hand, seemed less at ease. He was fidgeting, clearly eager to get to the heart of the matter. Emily could sense his impatience. As she began to show them to the meeting room, Mr. Thomas asked about the hospital's premium services, his eyes scanning the walls as if searching for something to impress him. "We have several top-tier services, Mr. Thomas," Emily said, trying her best to recall the details she had been briefed on. "Our private suites are designed for comfort and privacy, with full-time nursing staff and dedicated facilities. We also offer personalized care packages for our VIP patients." Mr. Thomas didn't seem entirely satisfied with the answer. His face was hard to read, but Emily noticed the slight raise of his brow. It was a subtle indication that he wanted more. "What makes your hospital stand out from others? Why should I invest in this place?" Emily hesitated for a moment. She was just an intern. What did she know about the grand vision of Starlight? But as Mr. Thomas's eyes remained fixed on her, waiting for an answer, she realized that this moment was about more than just words. It was about showing confidence, about demonstrating that she belonged here. This hospital was built on the vision of Mr. Lee. Emily began to provide not only the highest standards of medical care but also a sense of dignity and respect to every patient. Starlight isn't just about health, it's about creating a space where people can heal in an environment that feels like home. Mr. Lee, who had been listening quietly, nodded approvingly. "Well said, Emily," he commented, his eyes briefly meeting hers. "This is why we are different. It's about the people. Always." A sense of relief washed over Emily. She had done it. She had answered in a way that seemed to resonate with both men. Yet, as she continued to walk them through the hospital, explaining services and amenities. Her mind was still racing. Mr. Thomas's sharp, calculating gaze made her uneasy. She wondered if her words had been enough to impress him. Megan, who had been watching from a distance, finally stepped in to take over, relieving Emily from the responsibility of guiding the two guests. "Thank you for your help, Emily," she said with a smile. "You did well." As the day went on, Emily couldn't help but reflect on the morning's events. She had survived her first big challenge at Starlight Medical Center. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, nervousness, doubt, and a touch of pride when she had spoken confidently in front of Mr. Lee and Mr. Thomas. But as the visitors left and the hospital returned to its usual rhythm, Emily was left alone with her thoughts. There was so much to learn. And though she had done well today, she knew that she couldn't let her guard down. She had to stay sharp, stay professional, and always be ready for the unexpected. Because in a place like Starlight, where lives were at stake, there was no room for error. But beyond the challenges of the day, one thing was clear to Emily: she had found a purpose here. Something about working at Starlight, about being part of a team that cared for people and made a difference, resonated with her deeply. She was ready to face whatever came next. And more than anything, she wanted to prove to herself that she belonged in this world. A world that demanded both grace and grit. The following week at Starlight Medical Center, Emily's nerves had begun to settle. She was getting the hang of her responsibilities and was becoming more comfortable in her role at the reception desk. Megan had continued to guide her through the finer details of the job, and although there were still moments of uncertainty, Emily had started to feel that perhaps this internship could be the stepping stone to something greater. But as often happens in life, things don't always go according to plan. It was a particularly busy afternoon when the incident occurred. Emily was juggling multiple tasks at once, answering the phone, directing visitors, and checking in patients. The usual chaos of the hospital lobby had intensified, and Emily was doing her best to keep up with the fast pace. Just as she thought she could breathe, a familiar face appeared at the reception desk: Mr. Lee's son, James. James Lee was a man in his late 30s, tall with a sharp, intense gaze that seemed to scrutinize everything around him. Unlike his father, who was soft-spoken and approachable, James had an air of authority that made him seem somewhat unapproachable. Emily had met him a few times, always in passing, but never had a real conversation with him. Today, however, he wasn't just passing through. "Hi, Emily. I need to meet with Mr. Roberts, he's expecting me," James said curtly, his voice as sharp as his appearance. "Of course, Mr. Lee," Emily replied, trying her best to keep her voice steady. She quickly checked the appointment system and realized that James had arrived earlier than expected. "Mr. Roberts is in a meeting right now, but he's scheduled to meet with you in about 15 minutes. James didn't seem pleased with the news. His eyes darkened slightly, and he sighed impatiently, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. 15 minutes? I don't have time for that. I've got other things to do, he muttered under his breath. Can't you get him now? Emily felt a wave of panic rise within her. She had been warned about James. He was known to be a bit of a perfectionist and had a tendency to become agitated if things weren't done on time. She glanced toward Megan, who was busy with another task, and realized that she was alone in handling this situation. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lee. I'll try to reach Mr. Roberts and let him know that you're here," Emily said, trying to sound calm despite the mounting pressure. She reached for the phone, dialed Mr. Roberts' extension, and waited. The minutes stretched on, and there was still no answer. Her mind raced. What if James became frustrated? What if he complained to his father about her inability to manage the situation? The pressure felt overwhelming. After a few more moments, Emily finally decided to take matters into her own hands. She stepped out from behind the reception desk and walked to the waiting area, where James was standing with an air of impatience. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her as she approached. "Mr. Lee," I apologize for the wait. Mr. Roberts is in a meeting at the moment. But I can offer you a private room to wait. I'll also make sure to bring you some refreshments while you wait for him," Emily suggested, trying to remain composed. James gave her a long, assessing look before nodding curtly. "Fine. I'll wait. But I expect to meet with him immediately once he's free. No more delays." Emily led him to one of the private waiting rooms, her mind still racing. As she offered him a drink and left him alone to wait, she couldn't help but feel that this was her first real test in the job. The longer she kept him waiting, the more likely it was that he would grow frustrated. And the longer he stayed, the more uncomfortable she felt. She returned to the front desk, hoping that Megan would notice and step in to help. But Megan was still preoccupied. Emily glanced back at the private waiting room and let out a deep sigh. She knew this wasn't just about the delay, it was about proving herself. Could she handle a situation like this on her own? Could she keep James Lee, one of the hospital's most important figures, satisfied despite the setback? Emily spent the next few minutes pacing, attempting to calm herself. She understood now that this was not just about appeasing an impatient guest, it was about navigating the complex world of office politics, learning how to manage expectations, and building the resilience to stay calm under pressure. When the door to the private room opened, and Mr. Roberts finally walked in, James stood up, his body language stiff but professional. The brief encounter had ended, but Emily knew that this was far from over. As James walked past her, he gave her a small nod, the tension from earlier dissipating. But inside, Emily knew the lesson she had learned that day was invaluable. The real challenge wasn't always in the big, dramatic moments, it was in how you handled the small, everyday challenges that came your way. And as she stood there, watching James walk out of the building, she knew that she had a long road ahead of her, one that would require patience, perseverance, and the ability to stay grounded no matter what came next. The following week was marked by an unexpected challenge. Emily had been doing her best to learn the ropes at Starlight Medical Center, but nothing could have prepared her for the sudden crisis that arose one Thursday afternoon. The hospital, though bustling with activity, was running relatively smoothly until a phone call came in that would quickly escalate things. It all started when a woman, visibly distressed, stormed into the reception area. Her face was pale, and her hands shook as she clutched a folder tightly to her chest. Emily noticed her immediately. The woman seemed out of place in the otherwise orderly hospital environment, and Emily couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice tight with urgency. "I need to see Dr. Roberts." Immediately, Emily glanced at the sign-in sheet and saw that Dr. Roberts had just gone into a meeting. He wasn't available. But she knew she couldn't tell the woman that outright. The look on her face said that this was no ordinary request. It was one of those moments when you have to make a split-second decision, follow protocol or do what feels right. "Can I help you with something?" Emily asked gently, hoping her calm demeanor might ease the woman's distress. The woman's eyes welled up with tears as she began to speak, her voice quivering. "My father is in critical condition. They said he needs surgery, but I need to speak with Dr. Roberts. He's the one who handled my mother's case. I trust him." "I can't," she choked on her words. Emily could sense that the woman's panic was rising, and she realized the gravity of the situation. The woman wasn't just asking for an appointment or general advice. She was seeking help in what might be the most stressful moment of her life. It was at this moment that Emily felt the weight of her role, and the reality of working in a medical environment hit her squarely in the chest. "Please, calm down," Emily said softly, placing a hand on the woman's arm in an attempt to steady her. "I'm going to help you. Let's get you into a quiet room, and I'll see what I can do. We'll get Dr. Roberts for you." The woman nodded, her body still trembling, and Emily guided her to one of the private waiting rooms. She left her there, trying to keep her composed, as she went to find Dr. Roberts. The room felt too quiet, and the weight of the responsibility was starting to weigh heavily on her shoulders. Emily wasn't prepared for this kind of emotional situation. And yet here she was, trying to make things right. She found Dr. Roberts in his office, reviewing a patient's chart. "Dr. Roberts, there's a woman here. She says her father is in critical condition, and she needs to speak with you. She's very upset." Dr. Roberts looked up from his desk, his expression shifting into one of concern. "All right. Let's go talk to her," he said, standing up and following Emily down the hall. As they approached the room, Emily could feel the tension building. She wasn't sure what to expect when they walked in. Would Dr. Roberts handle the situation with the calm professionalism she had witnessed in him before? Would it be enough to calm the woman down? They entered the room, and the woman stood as soon as she saw Dr. Roberts. "Dr. Roberts, please. I need you to help my father. The doctors here said he needs surgery, but I don't know if I can trust them. You were the one who helped my mother. I trust you." Dr. Roberts stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll take good care of your father. You've come to the right place. I'm going to personally oversee his case. Let's talk about what happened." Emily stood by the door, watching the exchange, and realized just how powerful empathy could be in a healthcare setting. In that moment, Dr. Roberts' calm and confident demeanor made all the difference. He didn't just treat the woman as a patient, he treated her as a person. Someone who needed reassurance, guidance, and understanding. The situation was resolved quickly, with Dr. Roberts offering the woman a sense of control over her father's care. As they left the room, Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. It had been a difficult, tense situation, but she had handled it with care. Later, as Dr. Roberts walked back to his office, he paused and turned to Emily. "You did well, Emily," he said, his voice genuine. "In this field, it's not just about medical knowledge, it's about compassion, about recognizing when someone needs more than just treatment. You handled that well." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of pride that she hadn't experienced before. She realized that her role wasn't just about answering phones or checking in patients. It was about creating an environment where patients felt heard and understood, no matter how difficult the circumstances. As she returned to the front desk, Emily thought about the lesson she had just learned. It wasn't about finding quick fixes or immediate solutions. It was about taking the time to listen, to understand, and to be present for someone who needed it most. And in that moment, she knew she was beginning to grow not just as an intern, but as a person who could make a real difference in people's lives. A few weeks later, Emily's ability to handle difficult situations was tested once again. But this time, the stakes were much higher. It was a Friday morning when she was called into Dr. Roberts' office. The light from the window bathed the room in a soft glow. And for a brief moment, Emily thought it was just a regular meeting. However, as soon as she saw the serious expression on Dr. Roberts' face, she knew this conversation would be different. "Emily," he said, his voice steady yet filled with purpose, "we have an important meeting with a group of potential investors this afternoon. They're considering funding our new medical research wing, and their decision hinges on how well we can present ourselves as a team. I need you to manage the reception area during the meeting. You'll be in charge of welcoming the guests and making sure everything goes smoothly. This is your chance to show what you're capable of." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. Managing the reception area during a high-stakes meeting with investors was a big responsibility, and she had never done anything like it before. Her usual role involved answering phones, handling appointments, and making sure patients were checked in and out without issue. But this was different. These weren't just regular patients, these were people whose decisions could shape the future of the hospital. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this, Dr. Roberts," Emily admitted, her voice faltering slightly. "I don't want to mess things up." Dr. Roberts gave her a reassuring smile. "I understand how you feel. But this is an opportunity to step up. Emily, I believe in your ability to handle this. You've already proven yourself in stressful situations. Now it's time to show your leadership potential. Emily nodded, trying to quell the nervousness that bubbled up inside her. She had always been someone who thrived in the background, quietly doing her job. But this time, she would have to take charge and demonstrate the confidence she had yet to fully embrace. The meeting began later that afternoon, and Emily found herself standing at the front desk, watching the investors arrive. The lobby was calm, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air. She greeted each guest with a warm smile, handing them name tags and directing them to the conference room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized how much was riding on this moment. As the meeting progressed, Emily kept an eye on the clock and made sure everything was running smoothly. She noticed a few issues. One investor had misplaced their briefcase. Another was waiting for coffee that hadn't arrived yet, but each time, she handled it with a calm that surprised even herself. She took charge, delegating small tasks to the staff and ensuring that every detail was accounted for. As the hours passed, Emily felt more and more confident in her ability to manage the situation. When the meeting finally ended, the investors seemed pleased. They shook hands with Dr. Roberts and made their way out of the room, all smiling and chatting among themselves. Emily watched them go, a sense of relief washing over her. The pressure had been immense, but it had been worth it. She had done her job, and she had done it well. Dr. Roberts approached her with a smile as the last guest left. I couldn't have asked for a better performance. Emily, you handled everything perfectly. You've shown leadership and poise under pressure. I think you've got what it takes to be a key part of this team. Emily felt a surge of pride. It wasn't just the successful meeting that made her feel accomplished, it was the realization that she had grown. She had taken on a role she had once felt ill-prepared for and had managed it with grace and confidence. As she returned to her desk, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. From the nervous intern who had struggled to keep up in the beginning to the confident leader who had just managed a critical meeting. She had evolved in ways she hadn't expected. And it was in these moments of challenge, when the stakes were high, that she had learned the most about herself. For the first time, Emily began to believe that she could do more than just get by in this job. She could thrive. The path to leadership was never easy, but with the right guidance and a willingness to face challenges head-on, Emily knew she was on the right track. It was only a matter of time before she would rise to the next level. The days following the investors' meeting were a whirlwind. Emily had expected a few days of calm after the event. But instead, her responsibilities seemed to multiply. Word had spread about her successful management of the high-profile meeting, and she found herself receiving new tasks with increasing frequency. The recognition, while flattering, was also overwhelming. She had barely time to catch her breath before her next challenge appeared at the door. Dr. Roberts had called her into his office again the following week. This time, he didn't waste any time with pleasantries. His expression was serious, and Emily could tell that whatever was on his mind was important. Emily, I want to talk to you about something important. Dr. Roberts began. The investors were impressed with our hospital's leadership team, but they also had concerns about our patient care services. They feel that while our research wing is cutting edge, our patient experience could use some improvement. As part of our efforts to move forward, I want you to work directly with the patient services team to help improve our customer experience. I believe you have the ability to make a real difference. Emily's heart raced as she absorbed the news. She had worked with patients before, answering their calls or checking them in. But this was different. She wasn't just managing the reception area anymore. She was now being asked to lead an initiative that would directly impact the hospital's reputation and its future. I understand, Dr. Roberts, Emily said, trying to hide the nervousness in her voice. But this is a huge responsibility. How do I even begin? Dr. Roberts smiled reassuringly. You've already shown that you can handle the pressure. This will just require you to channel that energy into something new. Start by working with the patient services team to assess the current situation. Listen to the staff. Talk to the patients. And find out where we can improve. Your fresh perspective will be invaluable. That afternoon, Emily met with the patient services team. The team was a mix of veterans and newcomers, each of them with their own opinions and ways of doing things. The department head, Jessica, welcomed Emily with open arms but also with a clear warning. "Just so you know, it won't be easy," Jessica said. "There are always complaints. And not everyone is willing to change. But if you want to make a difference, you'll need to be persistent." Emily nodded, appreciating Jessica's candor. She spent the next few days observing, talking to staff, and collecting feedback from patients. At first, the task felt overwhelming. Every day brought new challenges: long wait times, billing issues, staff shortages, and patient complaints. It seemed as though no matter how much work she did, there was always more to be done. But Emily didn't give up. She found herself waking up early every morning, eager to tackle the day ahead. With each conversation she had, she learned more about the root causes of the issues. She worked with the team to streamline processes, reduce wait times, and address the concerns patients had about their experiences at the hospital. Slowly but surely, improvements began to show. It wasn't easy, and progress came in small steps. But Emily could see the positive changes taking place. Patients were happier, staff morale was rising, and the hospital's reputation for patient care began to improve. Months later, during a follow-up meeting with Dr. Roberts, Emily was able to present the results of her work. The changes she had implemented had made a significant impact. Patient satisfaction scores had risen, staff turnover had decreased, and the overall atmosphere at the hospital felt more positive. Dr. Roberts looked at her with a sense of pride. "Emily, I knew you were capable of this. But even I'm impressed by how much you've accomplished. You've transformed this department. And more importantly, you've shown what it means to lead with empathy and understanding." As Emily walked back to her desk, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had worked hard, and the results spoke for themselves. But more than that, she had learned something profound. Leadership wasn't just about managing tasks or checking off boxes. It was about connecting with people, understanding their needs, and making a positive impact on their lives. Through the challenges, she had found her true purpose, not just as an employee, but as someone who could inspire change. The road to leadership had been long and full of obstacles. But Emily now knew that the journey itself was the real reward. She wasn't just a manager of tasks, she was a leader who had learned the true meaning of empathy, perseverance, and the power of small actions. The lessons she had learned in her time at the hospital would stay with her for the rest of her life. And she was ready for whatever challenge came next. As the dust settled on the whirlwind of the past few months, each person involved in the hospital's transformation took a moment to reflect on the journey they had shared, and the lessons they had learned along the way. Emily, having faced the challenges of leading the patient services team, felt an overwhelming sense of pride and growth. She had stepped up in ways she hadn't thought possible and had proven to herself that she could make a difference. The road had been tough, filled with moments of self-doubt and unexpected obstacles, but each hurdle taught her something valuable. She had learned that leadership wasn't just about telling others what to do or executing grand plans, it was about understanding the people you lead and truly listening to their needs. It was about being persistent, patient, and empathetic, even when things weren't going well. Most importantly, she had learned that change, though slow and incremental, was possible when you put in the effort and cared deeply about the people you were serving. Her lesson was clear: true leadership is about making a meaningful impact in people's lives, one small step at a time. Dr. Roberts, the hospital's executive director, had always been confident in his leadership and in his ability to make tough decisions. But as he watched Emily grow and transform the patient services team, He realized that leadership wasn't just about managing resources or ensuring productivity. It was about nurturing talent, empowering others to step up, and trusting them with responsibility. He'd always been a firm believer in the value of experience. But Emily had shown him that sometimes a fresh perspective and a compassionate approach could achieve far more than traditional methods. Dr. Roberts' lesson was profound. The best leaders are those who empower others to lead, fostering growth and change in ways they may not even expect. Jessica, the head of patient services, had been skeptical at first. She had seen many newcomers come and go, all with grand ideas but without the patience to see them through. But Emily had proven her wrong. Jessica saw in her the kind of determination and humility that was rare in the workplace. Emily wasn't interested in taking credit for herself. She was focused on the team and what was best for the hospital and the patients they served. Jessica realized that true teamwork wasn't about competition, but about collaboration. And she had learned the importance of giving others the space and support to grow. Emily had reminded her that leadership could come from anywhere, and it often came from unexpected places. Jessica's takeaway was simple: leadership is not about authority, but about collaboration and fostering the success of those around you. The patients, who had once been just faces in a long line of hospital visits, were the real beneficiaries of the changes that had taken place. For many of them, the improvements were more than just about reduced wait times or smoother processes. They were about feeling heard, valued, and cared for. Emily had learned that behind every patient's name and file was a person with their own story, fears, and hopes. They weren't just patients, they were people. And in listening to their concerns, in making small but meaningful changes, Emily had shown them that the hospital cared deeply about their experience. The lesson they left with was the most profound: the true value of care lies not in the treatments we receive, but in the way we are treated as people. The staff in patient services, too, had their own lessons to reflect on. Many of them had been working for years, and the constant pressure of the job had left them feeling burnt out. They had seen their share of complaints and frustrations, and had often felt like their efforts went unnoticed. But when Emily came in with her fresh perspective and energy, they began to see their work in a new light. They were no longer just checking off tasks, they were part of something bigger, something that had a direct impact on people's lives. Emily had reminded them that their roles mattered, that their efforts were meaningful, and that they had the power to change someone's day with a kind word or a smile. Their lesson was clear: every role, no matter how small it may seem, plays a crucial part in the bigger picture of care. And as for Dr. Roberts, looking out over the hospital he had built, he realized the greatest lesson of all: that growth and progress could only happen when everyone involved was allowed to shine. Emily had given him the courage to trust more in others, and to see leadership as a shared responsibility, rather than something he held alone. He felt proud, not just of the hospital's successes, but of the people who had made them happen. The final, overarching lesson: leadership is about bringing out the best in others, trusting in their abilities, and giving them the space to thrive.